Welcome back to the Goals.com podcast, where we uncover what drives sales performance at the highest levels. Today, we're joined by Menno Enters, CEO of Nordic Consulting, a sales leadership firm helping SMBs build scalable sales systems and drive real revenue growth. Menno has over 25 years of experience leading national sales teams and now partners with business owners to optimize sales operations, drive accountability, and deliver measurable results. We'll dig into what it takes to turn chaos into structure and structure into sales growth. All right, Menno, should we get into it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Can say that SMBs struggle with sales because of a lack of time or expertise. In your experience, what usually is the real bottleneck holding these companies back?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot, actually. Most business owners, when they start their business, they're entrepreneurs. They love the product or service they'd like to sell. They're growing their business. They're getting into their client relationships or customer relationships, but they're truly visionaries. And at some point, their business gets to grow so fast and gets to be too big for them to handle themselves. They're confronted with the fact that they're going to have to let go of their business. They are visionaries. They know what makes their business tick, but they just don't have the time or expertise in certain areas. And many of them will say, I will continue to work on my sales and the growth of my business, but I have to hand off some of the overhead functions. Well, that all goes well. But then at some point, they are confronted by the fact, again, that they're doing all the selling. They probably want to grow faster. They need to invest in salespeople. And at that point, they will find themselves competing against their salespeople or get to the point to where they say, I have to start working on my business rather than in my business. So the real bottleneck is really the business owners themselves, and getting them to understand as quickly as possible that in order for them to sustain growth into the future, they have to outsource what they cannot or do not want to do themselves and really start working on their business rather than in their business.
I can relate to a lot of that. When you first step into a business as a fractional sales leader, what are the key metrics or signals you look for to assess the health of their sales operation?
Yes. So there's a distinction between signals and metrics. So signals are fairly easy to witness. When I first engage with clients, the first thing you'd like to do is find out what the company is like, what the sales motion is like, look at the sales team, how they're operating, if they're really considered outsiders within their own company or if they're an integral team of the company. And you can really find the vibe that exists, if they're all on the same team or if it's a siloed type of business. And that really starts with the business owners themselves. Again, going back to what I said earlier, if they're in all portions of the business in all different departments, that's definitely not a healthy sign of a healthy growth-oriented type of business, because they will be held back by the owner's energy or their own capabilities and abilities that will keep them there and that will allow them to grow. From a metrics perspective, though, there's various metrics. First of all, you want to look at top line growth. What has revenue looked like in the past? What is it looking like in the future? What are they forecasting to be? Look at salesperson turnover. Are these salespeople that have been there for a long time, do they show continued growth, or are they really turning from hunters into farmers, where they're more managing their own accounts and not really growing these accounts too much? Is the customer turnover high or not? If they're constantly going through new customers and losing customers, that is not necessarily conducive to a growth environment. So looking at those is very important. Think of customer or client acquisition cost. How much does it cost for these companies to attain new clients and to onboard these new clients? If indeed the acquisition cost continues to go up, then it means that too much effort is having to be spent on onboarding new clients, which means that they really have to start working to retain those customers. The same with the lifetime value of a customer, the CLV sometimes, where you look at how much has this client produced in terms of long-term revenue. Again, if that's declining, it's typically a sign, a symptom of an unhealthy sales organization. It therefore becomes the role of me as an advisor to find not the symptom, that those are the symptoms, but to find the underlying root cause that has caused those CLVs and customer acquisition costs to increase. And that's really what we do in a nutshell.
Oh, okay. You use the sales acceleration framework as the backbone of your consulting. What makes that framework so effective, and how does it differ from the traditional sales leadership model?
So there's not too many organizations out there that are worldwide. First of all, Sales Acceleration is the company that I work with as one of its 240 or so advisors across the world, really. And we've worked with thousands of businesses, even large size businesses, not just small to medium sized businesses. And we found that most companies grow in spite of themselves, not because of themselves. The objective for most companies is to grow, and they want to future-proof that growth, but they're lacking a framework. Think of it as just a rule book. What makes us tick as a company? Where do we want to be in the future? Think of building a house, for example. If I wanted to build a house and I knew that the house was supposed to house 4 people, I would build my house and the foundation suitable for 4 people. That means that if I all of a sudden wanted to expand my family and increase the number of residents in my house, I couldn't simply start building levels upon levels on top of my house. At some point, the foundation itself is not strong enough to sustain that growth in a household. And so you really need to focus on a solid foundation that is built for growth. And it needs to be done in a very deliberate fashion, in an organized fashion. And most companies don't have that in-house knowledge and experience to do that. And Sales Acceleration, through its thousands of companies worth of expertise, has been able to come up with a foundational formula for growth for these companies.
Got it. You've helped clients achieve an average of 32% sales growth in the first year. What are some of the common changes or systems that lead to such fast results?
So one of the things that Sales Acceleration really fundamentally approaches new clients in is to divide it into 4 distinct categories. Number 1 would be the sales infrastructure. What is the DNA of a company? The second one would be a sales strategy. And the third one would be sales teams. That is the recruiting and onboarding and developing of sales teams. And then the fourth component is sales management, where you really get into the sales leadership and leading sales teams towards growth. So when these categories are applied in a systematic manner, then typically an average of 32% can be realized over time. And many times that actually happens the first year. A lot of companies will focus on one really well and on the other 3 not so well. I would say that sales teams, especially when you're onboarding new salespeople, there is no playbook given. So these salespeople will show up to work. They're kind of riding along with some people, maybe some on-the-job type of training, and then they're set out to do their own thing, which really leads to disparate sales processes that will most likely have to be untaught at some point. Sometimes they have a great sales manager who may do a great job leading sales teams, but who believes that sales is an art form and not a science. There's definitely science to it, and that's what the sales infrastructure and sales strategy really help with. It's almost like a doctor. An advisor is a doctor. You see the symptoms, but rather than saying, well, there's all these different things that you can do, the job of a solid sales acceleration advisor is to say, this is the root cause of your problem, and this is what it will take to cure that illness, not to cure the symptom of, hey, here's another sales methodology or a new sales approach, whatever the case may be.
Sales infrastructure can sound abstract to some leaders. Can you break down what a solid sales infrastructure actually looks like in practice?
Yeah, so if the framework is really the foundation on which to build and expand your sales program, if you will, the sales infrastructure is the nuts and bolts. Think of a CRM like Goals.com, for example. A CRM like Goals.com, it really takes a prospect through the sales motion, the sales process, that will end up in the eventual negotiation and close of a sale. So that's one. Another one would be creating SMART goals, ones that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Making sure that all the salespeople have the tools they need in order for them to be successful. It could be a cadence of meetings, sales meetings, quarterly business reviews with clients, a playbook by which a sales team goes to market to get business and new business for a company.
You've led national sales teams and now coach executives. What's the biggest leadership lesson you learned about building accountability without killing motivation?
Yeah. Interestingly enough, the word accountability has come up in recent conversations that I've had with people. And you'll find that the definition between accountability and responsibility someone gets muddled a little bit. I would say that if you look at the definition of responsibility, it's about the duties, tasks, and actions that are needed to produce a certain outcome. But accountability is the ownership of that outcome, whether it's good or bad or not. So when you're talking about building accountability without killing motivation, it really is about shared ownership. So accountability can sometimes be forced, meaning if a salesperson is accountable to a certain goal and they don't make that goal, they could theoretically be terminated. That is being accountable. That is being owning the outcome, which is a bad result. Shared ownership is where the sum of all separate parts produce more than the sum. What I'm saying is sales people work together rather than compete against one another and work as a team in order to get to a common goal, which could be a team goal in terms of revenue achieved in one particular year. So great coaches build a culture of that shared ownership where no one takes the blame or credit for any particular action, but really shares in the overall goal. You've all heard, and I'm sure you have heard players during a press conference say, hey, this was me and the team. It was the team. It was a team effort. It wasn't about me. We were all doing our job. And that was to win that common goal of a victory, for example. And that is why it's understated. Sometimes people think that team building exercises and events are perhaps a waste of time or a social gathering. Team building events are actually extremely important to creating a team culture where there's shared accountability rather than responsibility over one's own goals and actions.
You're a father of 5, and you talk about living a purpose-driven life. How has parenting shaped your leadership philosophy and your approach to consulting teams?
Yes, a team of 5. The first thing that I had to understand was that none of these 5 boys were the same. And it's funny that you mention that because I've never thought about it in terms of, hey, you were really a leader over these 5 boys, and how did you shape those boys to be their own? But it was really realizing that they were all different. Also that you could tell them when they were young what to do, but there comes a certain age where it's less about obedience and more about ownership, to what we talked about before, the accountability. If they came back with a bad grade, I wouldn't do the homework for them. I said, I hate to tell you, this is your problem. You're going to have to fix it. And it was not to pressure them, but to really motivate them for a purpose. What is it that you'd like to be? And let's figure out a path to get you there. And it could be different for everyone. I have a welder. I have a salesperson. I have a nuclear engineer. They're all so different, but yet every one of them tries to be the best they can be, which is different for every one of them. So it's really about the people, getting the most out of those people, getting them out of their comfort zone, instilling ownership in them, and then be empathetic and be patient as you continue to push for outperforming their own goals, but doing so in a systematic manner. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense to me. You've mentioned the thrill of the win and learning from defeat. How do you help business owners or teams bounce back from losses and keep momentum going?
Right. I've had quite a bit of loss, probably an unfair amount of loss over my life. And sometimes people ask me, man, after having experienced all that loss, Menno, how do you get to be so sunny, whether I'm sunny or not? But it's really, the answer has always been the same. I realize that I can't change the past. I can only change the future. And so to make the most out of that future, let the things of the past be kind of a reset opportunity for you, something where you learn from mistakes, from the hardship that you have, and use that to your benefit. There's so many companies that have zero tolerance for mistakes or losses that immediately when someone makes a mistake, they get terminated for whatever reason. Well, that kills risk taking and courage and innovation and the people that are still there. So rather than looking at at it as a win or loss where you have to cut your losses. Show some empathy, show some willingness for people to make mistakes, but use them as lessons that they can build on for the future. It goes for owners themselves too. They're always striving for perfection, but they'll never be happy. So rather than focusing on the, hey, what does perfection look like? Enjoy the journey, enjoy the growth. Know that it's not a merry-go-round, but a roller coaster. And in the end, it takes an entire team, the entire company, and everyone that works in it to produce growth and to produce those results.
I love that. We're seeing more companies embrace fractional leadership models. Why do you think this approach is gaining traction, and where do you see it going in the next few years?
Yeah. I think it's probably no secret that the workforce is aging, that a lot of retirement age people and people who are typically highly compensated are replaced by less expensive, younger workforce. It's a fact of life. But the problem is that this younger workforce is still inexperienced. They're well educated, but inexperienced. They lack some of the wisdom and know-how that has taken other people years to build. And so these companies now find themselves in a dilemma where they still need to rely on the more experienced, older workforce to help train and mentor the younger, less experienced sales force. And I think that that will continue for a while. You could argue that it probably will go through the next recession, whenever that may be, where companies will still try to reduce headcount to lower expenses to carry themselves through that recession. But I still feel like the fractional leaders, whether it be in HR or marketing, or in my particular case, sales, to help them see them through that recessionary period, to be able to hire people back who are most likely going to be more experienced than they were before.
If you could give one piece of advice to a small business owner who feels stuck in their sales growth, what would it be?
I think that sales owners still own the company, or business owners still own the company. They want to be everything to everyone, and success gets in the way of that. At some point, business owners have to realize they cannot work in the business anymore and have to start working on their business. And it really starts with letting go of certain aspects of the business, whether it be bookkeeping or accounting, HR related matters, even financial matters, where they're like, I don't know how to deal with those. I still want to be with my clients. They will start outsourcing that. They will get a CPA to work for them. They will get an HR company or an outsourced HR consultant to work with them. So if they find themselves stuck in that sales growth, if they see stagnant sales, if they feel like no matter what they do, they can't seem to get ahead, they can hire more salespeople, but the salespeople stop producing results for them. It's really time for them to get a person like myself as a sales advisor to get them unstuck in that sales growth dilemma and have me taking over that function so that they can start working on their business fully and making sure that they're fully resourced and staffed and equipped to help them take them into that next level of sales growth.
All right, guys, good stuff. That was Menno Enters from Nordic Consulting, sharing what it takes to build a scalable, high-performing sales operation. If you're serious about growing your sales and leading with purpose, give this full episode a listen, only on the Goals.com podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and follow for more conversations with top leaders. Menno, thanks again for being here.
This episode is brought to you by Goals.com, the sales performance platform built to help teams stay focused, motivated, and on track. While most CRMs just track data, Goals.com drives real results. It's simple, affordable, and designed to help your sales team hit targets faster, without the headache of complex setup or costly consultants. Whether you're using a CRM or not, Goals.com works seamlessly to elevate your performance. Book a fun, fast demo today at Goals.com.